Hi, I'm Heather Telford and I have a stamped landscape card to share with you today. I'm working with the new Farmland stamp from Penny Black, but I'm pairing it with another stamp to create a slightly different scene. I'm working on hot pressed watercolor paper, and the first thing I'm doing is just marking where that horizon is with antique linen distress ink. It's very pale ink, and I just need to know where the horizon is because I'm going to paint the sky in. Using speckled egg and faded jeans distress ink, I'm going to fill all the space above the horizon with diluted ink. Even though this footage is sped up, I'm still working fairly quickly because I want all this sky to be watery, kind of running into each other, so I don't want any of the ink to dry on the paper. So I'm just moving with the diluted ink plus water from a water jar to make it into a pretty bluey grey sky. Once that sky is totally dry, I'm moving back to the stamp and starting to add the appropriate colours, starting with mowed lawn distress ink along all those trees on the horizon, and then a little bit of pine needles as well, just to have two different greens. But the end of my pine needles marker is very juicy. I think maybe there's something wrong with it. So even though I laid it down there, I had to wipe a lot of it off with a paper towel, otherwise it would have just smudged big green smudges on the paper. I added a little bit of water to move the ink, and then you can see that I did get quite a bit of that pine needles, but it does look like trees or green grass on the horizon. Now I'm going in between the tree shapes with a brown marker to kind of space those trees out so the green area doesn't turn into one big blob of green. There's brown in between and brown along the base, kind of where the ground would be and where the tree trunks would be. I usually give the ink a little bit of a spritz after I've applied it to the stamp, just so that it is both wet, it hasn't dried out, but also so that it moves a bit on the stamp before hitting the paper. This stamp shows three farmers' fields, so I'm doing the two edge ones, like left-hand side, right-hand side in rusted hinge, and that middle one in crushed olive. And one of the sides doesn't even make it onto this square piece of paper, but this right-hand field is the rusty hinge one, and then this left-hand field is crushed olive. You'll have to use your imagination to work out what these different crops are. The green one and the rusty coloured one, I'm not sure, but they look authentic. I'm not inking the stamp right down to the base because there's another stamped image that's going to fill the bottom of the panel, and that's the Homeward stamp also from Penny Black, and also looks like it's out in the country near a farm. And we're going to kind of look through the tree and over the little hill to the farm in the background. So that's why I didn't continue the farmer's fields right down the panel. I've inked the tree and the grass up with mowed lawn, and now I'm inking the trunk and branches of the tree with ground espresso. And I'm taking care not to ink that line on the left of what you're seeing. behind the tree. There's a hill line. I don't want to use that in this scene. I just want the tree to be standing in front of the farmer's fields without an extra hill. So I'm just wiping that off each time I ink so that that doesn't end up in my scene. And I realized that the tripod was touching the table, so every time I pushed on the stamp, I jiggled the table. I finally worked that out, so sorry about all that jiggling. You can see the image is there, but it needs a couple more impressions to really be bold enough to be a foreground image. Again, with the ground espresso, this time on the fence as well, a little bit more water so that ink moves, and the tree is beginning to be more prominent. Now that I have the foreground stamping done, I can pull that rusty hinge ink down to fill the space. I love putting together these scenic stamps. Most of them are a scene in themselves, so you absolutely don't have to combine them, but I just like making something new with them. So that's why I've put this tree in the foreground, and you can barely see the farmhouse anymore. It's not a feature of the scene, but you can see those fields, and I think it just gives added depth. I mixed up a slightly darker brown, a mix of rusty hinge and ground espresso for the tracks, the wheel tracks in that little bit of grass, and painted them there. And I'm just creating more depth in the tree and the grass and the trunk. A little bit of crushed olive ink as well in the leaves of the tree to give variety, the two colors of leaves in the tree. And then I'm just blending what I've stamped with water to make it, to increase the coverage. I'm trying to go over the wood in that fence also with the bullet tip of my distress markers, but I often find that although the brush tip works well, the bullet tip I don't have a lot of success with. So I've given myself some ink to just keep building up depth in the tree trunk. Now that all the stamping is done and I've taken it out of the positioner, I'm just adding a little more detail with the paintbrush. The same inks, adding a little more depth in the horizon area there with the trees, making sure the brown space in between the trees can be seen. I'm also covering up a bit of the white space in the scene. I don't want to get rid of all of it because little white areas do make highlights in a painting, but I don't want it to look like it's snowing in on these farmers' fields today. I'm using all the original colors. I'm not adding new colors at this point, but continuing to add rusted hinge and crushed olive and mowed lawn, maybe mixing them together to get a little more depth, but not deviating from these colors. You know, I like to stick with a fairly limited palette, and this time I have with a couple of greens, a couple of browns, and a little bit of black. If you're interested in looking at more scenes like this, I've done a lot of scenic stamping over the years, and you can visit my blog where they are tagged as stamped stamped landscapes. I don't know why I have trouble with that every time. End up staying. Anyway, I'm sure you get what I mean. Visit my blog, heathertelford.com, to see more scenes and more details about this card. Thanks for joining me. There are more videos for stamped landscapes on YouTube as well. I'll see you again soon.